You have a go to proceed?
Restart complete.
Y'all have a good trip.
Roger that.
You slowly wait for it.
30.
29.
At 28.
27.
26.
25. 24.
23. 22.
21.
20 seconds and counting.
19.
18.
17. 16. 15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10 seconds.
6.
5.
4. And a 3.
2.
1.
Hi, welcome to Trust No One, the X-Files podcast, where my fellow agents and I discuss episodes of the X-Files. Today we'll be discussing the second episode of the second season, entitled The Host, which originally aired on the September 23rd, 1994. Chris Carter wrote this episode, and Daniel Sackheim was its director. So the first question, what are your opinions about the makeup and special effects in this particular episode?
Ooh, I liked him.
Yeah, I did too. Again, the creativity kind of blows my mind because I'm not a creative person, and just what they came up with and how they executed. Chef's kiss.
I actually looked up the worm. What's it called?
Fluke worm?
The fluke worm.
The fluke, yeah.
Because
I wanted to see if the bite mark would actually have looked like that, and yeah, it really would have. You know, I was fascinated by that. I had not heard. I'd heard of Fluke Man from the show, and I had obviously seen pictures of the character in makeup, but I hadn't ever connected it just on my own to the fluke worm, and so I then looked it up, and I'm like, oh wow, that's really fascinating and horrifying at the same time. So I thought they did a great job with that. I understand that they had a lot of issues with the makeup.
Yeah,
it would dissolve in water. So
Yeah, that's crazy.
There were some problems there.
Gee, we have one take to get this right, guys.
It's true. It's true. And the guy that was wearing it, I guess,
Darren Morgan.
Yeah.
Yes, who has written episodes of
he's the brother of Glenn Morgan, who's written episodes, co-written
okay.
of X-Files in the first season.
And I guess he had no sense of smell in the costume, so he wouldn't eat or anything when he was in it. But
also, as well as being brother of Glenn Morgan, who wrote episodes with James Wong, like in the first season, and I think they did the Little Green Man, didn't they? The season 2 premiere. But also the guy who actually wore the suit as well, Darren Morgan, like came back to the X-Files like in later seasons and wrote for the X-Files himself as well.
Wow, nepotism is alive and well at the X-Files.
But I'll tell you what, if it was nepotism, that is one that I can actually support, because those are some of the, in my opinion, best episodes that the series has.
Yeah.
I loved the makeup and the costuming and special effects. I thought for an episode that's Monster of the Week, it shows the monster loads, like at various points in various forms, and it's real close-ups, and you get actually quite long kind of shots where you just get to stare into the eyes of it. And I love that. It's not, sort of a shadow in the corner, or was that not an alien? You actually get to really come face to face with, the so-called abomination, but it creates empathy, I find, with the creature, because it's just doing what it needs to do to survive. It's like Frankenstein's monster, right? Or I don't know, even Alien. Like the whole purpose is it's driven by an urge to reproduce and an urge to connect. And so I'm definitely team monster on this one. I love this one.
Yeah, I liked it too. And in fact, I said the same thing when we were talking about comments a couple weeks ago to get ready for this, and I said it was so nice that they were able to actually show the monster of the week this time, and spend some real time on it. And I really liked that too.
So which of the scenes in this episode do you think are the creepiest, and why?
The creepiest?
Yeah.
The one in the sewer for me, when Mulder was going after that monster. It's just not just creepy, but also like kind of like wondering what's going to happen to him if he's going to be the next one, the next host, essentially.
I think what
Yeah.
irked me about the sewage scenes is that nobody was wearing any PPE. Like, let's just go stomp around in raw sewage with absolutely nothing on. Like that. Nope.
I don't think people thought about it as much then.
No.
You're
I mean,
telling
I'm
me
sure that if you were
25
a
years
worker,
ago,
you had to
you'd have
wear
gone
it.
around the sewage without anything on your feet? You just stomp around in regular old shoes?
Yeah, no, you're right about that. That's true. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was sewage or if it was just storm water. Like I
think it was
didn't know which one it
sewage.
was.
I'm not
It was
even
Yeah.
going to walk into a public restroom without like some sort of
Hazmat suit.
covering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked the scene where the creature, I hate to call it a creature, but it is, was kind of behind the gurney when he was in the, and it was good because it was creepy, but it was also very moving. It was very sad in a way because
Yeah.
I felt bad for it. It's like it had been trapped there.
That's
And so I thought that was effective.
I agree with you there. It's interesting how in some of these episodes the writers are able to get you to feel empathy for like the bad guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So
I think I don't know what we can ascribe that to. Is it? I mean, couldn't really be the actor unless it's the actor's eyes that you're looking at, or maybe it's just the way the scene is set up that it's hiding in the corner. Yeah,
Well,
I thought that was.
how do you think this episode compares with like other, like earlier Monsters of the Week episodes, such as Two Moons and the Jersey Devil?
I thought it was better. And I know, Dan, you don't agree with that, but I really did. I thought that there was a lot more texture in this episode. I felt like we got a lot of information that we typically don't get in the former Monsters of the Week episodes. Even at the end, we get a lot of information on where it probably came from and how it originated. And so I liked all of that. I felt that there was a lot more information that we got.
And it wasn't just the bad guy, like Monster of the Week. Like I don't feel sympathy for Tooms at all. I just
I don't either. Yeah, I agree. It's a creature of circumstance.
I do a bit for the Jersey Devil.
Yeah, me too. And it's weird, isn't it? Because in the Jersey Devil and in this one, they are less human looking, but far more human in terms of what we value as core humanity.
Yeah.
So there's a sense here that even though this creature is nonverbal, you can tell by its behaviors that, it's not out to attack apart from the biological drive to reproduce. And actually it just wants to go back to the sea. It just wants to escape again. And there's that great line where it says, this isn't something that nature made, we've done this, we are responsible for this. And I think because of that, we have to kind of look at it as a kind of metaphor for what we've done to I don't know, the planet and environment.
Absolutely.
So that's why it gets me, I think, really, really quite powerfully.
I thought it was quite prescient in that way. To be talking about those kinds of things then. I mean, I know obviously it's still fresh on people's minds 10 years after Chernobyl, not quite 10 years, but I still thought it was, again, I think that goes to how I feel about the texture of the writing in this one, where you have a lot more information and you have a lot more to kind of chew on and think about. And I was pleasantly surprised at all of that.
So you're saying that this episode is like an onion and it has layers like Shrek.
Yeah, I guess so. Not a glass onion, but an onion. An onion. I'll shut up.
What do you think the significance of the series settings is? Why do you think they chose to set scenes there?
What was that?
What is the significance of the series settings?
The sewer settings?
I have a bit of geeky knowledge on this one linked to Chris Carter. So Chris Carter's dad worked in construction, and he was a construction worker who worked underground in the sewers for quite a large part of his career. So he would come home and tell Chris about, you know, what life's like down there and things like that. And like, if you look at all the different sewer systems, which apparently I enjoy doing in various locations around the world, some of these systems are like super duper old. So we're talking basically like this other world that's been built in, say, the 1920s, 1930s, in thinking of New Jersey and New York and places like that. And it's like they are underground worlds, you know, which ultimately don't really kind of come up to the surface very often. So there's something about what's been going on in the sort of belly of the beast or below the surface across the years, I think. And I think this whole idea of like, you know, urban legends about what lurks in the sewers, like the pythons that escaped or the crocodiles, you know.
The giant crocodiles.
Yeah, and that was all genuine stuff, right? So in the 1930s in New York, there was genuinely breeding populations of crocodiles under there. And they went down and they killed them all with guns. They brought these things up and, you know, most were about 2 foot, but some were 7. And but by the 1960s, there was nothing down there, but the rumors persisted. It was like, oh yeah, loads of people have like bred underwater like crocodiles and, you know, stuff like that. So it goes from being like this grain of truth into urban legend, into myth, into which I think is what the X-Files is all about, right? So I love the idea that we're down in the sewers, and of course Mulder's pissed off as well, isn't he? Because he thinks he's just been sent to do a shitty job. You know, all the obvious jokes are there at the beginning, and he has a lovely little tantrum links to that. And I don't know which other kind of crappy job he would have been that annoyed about. So possibly that as well.
Literally the crappy job.
Yeah, I wonder if the sewer setting, you know, when you had alluded earlier to what we've done and what we've created and how humans definitely view themselves as, you know, top of the food chain, the best, the most important. And here's this other being that has, you know, entered the universe and they're in the sewer because we don't value them. And, you know, it's like, okay, we created them and they didn't want to be here. They didn't ask to be here. So, you know, screw them. And, you know, the sewer's the lowest kind of place within our society, I guess, if you're looking at it, you know, from a stature standpoint.
I think that's a good point. I think that's another part of the message, I think, of the episode. I think that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Like environmental destruction by humanity.
Yeah.
Do you think this is like highlighted or lost within the episode?
I think because there's so many sort of creepy bits with fluke worms coming out of mouths and various other things, I think this episode gets remembered for being, oh my God, it's the one with the fluke monster. And I think although the point is made throughout, the links to Chernobyl are overt. There's that really nice like little micro monologue towards the end that highlights it. You know, I think more could have been done. I think if it was made today, more would be done of weaving that the whole way through and talking about what we flush down the sewer and what that turns into. So,
yeah, if it was today, you're right. Yeah.
And do you think like references to Chernobyl were respectful, or like was the disaster like used for entertainment?
No, I thought it was appropriate. It's certainly something that people have to think about. You know, that it's not only a disaster that happened a number of years ago, but this is what we have done, and who knows what other things we could create from the horrible things that we do. So I thought it was done respectably and what's the word I'm looking for?
Respectfully
in that way.
But it wasn't exactly coming from Chernobyl, right? It was like from a boat that was carrying materials that was radioactive from Chernobyl. And actually, it's in a way, it was basically saying the Russian really didn't care about, you know, what they were doing, and they just like grabbed that material and move it by boat. So to me, there was still that a little bit of would we have done better? Like how else would we have disposed of this?
Oh, right.
That sort of like leads into my next question. Like, what would you say are like the socio-political implications of this episode, particularly like with this being a series produced in Canada but featuring a Russian crew and extensive dialogue in both Russian and English? Like, what would you say? Like, how could that be viewed, like both in the context of when this episode was released, and then also like viewing it like nowadays?
I think they've always kind of, not always, but in some of the episodes, it's almost like a hidden gem or hidden meaning that you kind of have to pull from the story about things that have happened in society. And I think when you're creating an episode or doing a movie, there's a fine line between your entertainment aspect and then also trying to get a message across. And I think, as you asked, was this respectfully done? Having the references to Russia, I feel like it's hard to kind of get like a topic to really make you think in pop culture today.
So that's a good way to do it.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
absolutely.
saying? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I can see why other people might disagree with that. It's like, oh, this is just entertainment. I don't want to have to think about this. I want it to be mindless. But I mean, I feel like in this case, it was Chris Carter who wrote the episode. He did a good job making people think.
Because
I mean, go ahead.
I guess it's more like about the U.S.-Russian political situation than it is about, even though it's produced in Canada. Because obviously Mulder and Scully are American FBI agents. So,
I think there's a really important thing to notice about the nature of the victims here, and that the victims are across nations and across oceans and across all this thing, right? So it's like the victims of Chernobyl, the victims of any sort of, nuclear incident, be it weaponized or be it, an industrial accident. We've had Fukushima, we've had various other things, it's never the people in power that suffer the consequences. It's the ordinary workers, right? It's going to be your local animals, your local people, the people on the ship who are just trying to do their job. Why does that first young man get sent down there? You're the young one, you get the crappy jobs, right? So, and when you look at it, it's the sewage workers, it's the guys that are at risk here. And I think it's interesting that all the victims are male, and that's something, that's a whole other thing, I think, to do with what it means to be male and at risk as opposed to female.
But that's also coming from, first of all, there was the end of the beginning of the 90s, so the end of the Cold War, so that makes sense in that context because it's still written in the US. And as far as being male, I mean, even now most boats are staffed by men. It's pretty rare to see women on that kind of ships. So I wasn't too surprised by this, that it shows basically, Chernobyl and the Russian mishandling of the radioactive material. And I wonder if that same episode had been written 10 years after, if they would have chosen any of the environmental disasters in the US to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, Agent Deb. I think they chose something that was a big story in terms of everybody's going to know this. They're familiar with it, at least in some facet, so that it was, I think, because it was such a big issue when it happened, that it's like, okay, that it becomes a little more believable that these are the ramifications from human activity.
Well, it's such a large story that you can use it for entertainment because everybody is aware of it. So, they can use that as the linchpin to the story because everybody knows when you say Chernobyl what you were talking about. So then it's covered.
Relatable.
Yeah. One thing that Agent Michaels that you'd said that I just wanted to expand upon for a moment was about, you were saying, a lot of people may not dig deeper into it and just want to watch for entertainment. And I think the best written entertainment shows are those that you can watch just on the surface and completely enjoy, but then there's also enough subtext so that if you do want to dig deeper, you can. And I think that is a testament to how this episode was put together, because I do feel like you can watch it just purely as entertainment, or you can dig a little deeper and see some of the other messages that are being presented throughout the episode.
But they could also have chosen a ship that would have done something in Japan right after Hiroshima.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
right.
But there was such an interest in Russia after, like, as you were saying, Agent Deb, like the Soviet Union had just recently fallen.
Yeah.
And I know my mom at the time was a professor of Russian language and literature, and suddenly her classroom swelled because everybody wanted to go over there. They're like, oh, now we can. And so people were interested in cultural exchanges, in doing business. And it was nice that they actually got a pair of actors who were native Russian speakers. I could tell from their accents, they're real Russians. before the fall of the Soviet Union, that didn't happen. You got Americans doing terrible Russian accents.
Yeah.
There weren't enough
Yeah.
Russians.
Ah, yeah.
Suddenly Russia was open again. And so I don't think that it was meant so much as an indictment of poor mishandling of Chernobyl, because not everybody thinks that nuclear power is evil. Like, some people think of it as clean energy, believe it or not.
I
Right?
mean, it is.
So I think that what the episode, the reason that they chose that was because it was recent, and because of the renewed passion and interest in Russian culture.
Yeah.
I mean, Chernobyl, to me, it's like, yeah, nuclear is clean energy, and I'm not against it at all. It's just, I think Chernobyl was essentially a human disaster, because everything that could have gone wrong, from like staffing to pure maintenance negligence, went wrong.
Right.
And literally shipping essentially really hot material in a ship that's not meant for it is just one more thing of things that went wrong in that disaster.
But since it's not a ship from Hiroshima, and since it is a Russian ship, and since like the Russians are unused like so often nowadays, do you think like the context in which we view the political interactions, as it were, in this episode have changed and have different reverberations nowadays than they had when the episode was released? Or do you just view it through the context of when it was released?
I think, without wanting to go on and discuss future episodes too much, there's references later on to Russians and Russian experience that I think are far more problematic than this one. And I think when we look at kind of TV that's being made today, I mean, if you watch Stranger Things, right, if you've seen the last season of that, the Russian kind of, story through that, I think is really very entertaining, but I think it's based on some horrendous stereotypes and some really limited views, and actually perpetuates this idea of all Russians are this, or all Russian men are this. So, within this, the Russians that were featured, I just felt like they were just guys doing their job who got caught.
Yeah, me too.
I just felt sad for them,
That's how I felt too.
Awful. I didn't feel any sense of particular blame. So, and that's obviously given the context that we're in now. So,
yeah, I'm right with you on that.
Regarding like guys who are just doing their job, basically, or not, as the case may be, like how and why does the relationship between Skinner and Mulder develop in this episode?
I
love it. I think it's great that Skinner is in this uncomfortable position, and he's this new guy, and he's very grumpy, which I love. Like, it's fun. I actually read that the actor tried to get on the X-Files multiple times, and he kept getting rejected. Finally, his agent was like, "No, there's a part now for this guy, Agent Skinner," and he comes in, and he's in a bad mood because he's like, "I'm just gonna get rejected again," and he's got this attitude. And when he's reading his lines, like to audition, he's got this attitude, and they're like, "You're hired." And that grumpy attitude actually serves him really well in this role. And I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's caught between a rock and a hard place, where, like, on the one hand, he's like, well, I kind of believe that the X-Files did some good work, and I'd like to bring them back, but my hands are tied. Everybody's got a boss, right? He made that comment. So the relationship with him and Mulder is so interesting because of that. Because on the one hand, he wants to help Mulder. On the other hand, he's sternly putting Mulder in his place. Those two things are very different. So
yeah, I like it. I like that.
Fun.
I like the relationship, and I like that we learn a little bit more about how he felt, because at the end of the last season, we didn't see that side yet. We just saw him as the new bad guy, I guess, the new guy that's going to shut them down. But now you see that, well, he's really rooting for them, but like you said, his hands are tied. So it brings up an interesting dynamic and a nice little push and pull to the character. So I love that.
Well, after like what's gone on between Mulder and Skinner, like why do you think Skinner requests Mulder for the case in this episode?
I think he massively respects him, and he knows that he's the only one that can solve it. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, Mulder completely takes it the wrong way. And I love the
Yeah.
scene. I think one of my favorite bits is when he storms into the room. He's like, I'm going to tell you what I think. He's like, yeah, come on in. And it's just that lovely
Yeah.
little power play. And Mulder's
Group
like,
of people.
oh no. And it's classic because Mulder's being such a like, I don't know, sulky teenager in this episode, which I love because I love sulky teenagers. I work with them. So, you know, so I love seeing him like that. But I also love seeing Skinner pull his teacher moment where he's like, yeah, come on then. Do you want to tell the class? You know, it's such a lovely dynamic.
Petulant boy.
Yeah, it's gorgeous though, because actually Mulder needs that as well. And you know, when he presents his report to him and says, you know, how are you not shocked at all this? He's like, no, I processed that earlier, thank you, because I'm an adult. Like it's literally that interplay, which is just, it makes the episode for me because it's so gorgeous, and Mulder needs it.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of plays on who is the friend in the FBI, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Who is the new friend? I'm assuming we'll find out later. We better.
No, it's never mentioned again.
You're not going to you're not going to be mad at this. You're going to like it. Yeah.
Good.
But Mulder says that Skinner is just rubbing his nose in it. Do you think he is, or is there a reason for all of this?
No, there's a reason for it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's Mulder's misinterpretation of events.
Yeah, I think that Skinner saw the content of the case and probably thought, you know, this is right in his wheelhouse, so I'm going to give this to him. Perhaps as an olive branch, you know, after everything that had happened.
I think so too.
And you know, Mulder's
he's literally saying like, here's an X-File,
right,
and Mulder's like, whoosh, how dare you?
I know, you're just making me do a crap job, you know.
But I mean, it's not completely uncharacteristic of Mulder to not pick up on the social cues, or he's often so caught up in that like tunnel vision of what he has going on in his head. It's not completely surprising that he overlooked such a big detail.
And isn't it a great little addition for the actor too, for him to be able to play that, you know, petulant child, and then kind of have to get put in his place a little bit. And it's nice to see. I mean, again, that's more texture to the characters, and that was great. You know, I loved it.
It's also, I think, showing two different sides to Skinner. You know, you're introducing him as like, hey, I'm going to give this to you. I'm going to throw you a bone. But then, you know, like, as you guys have said, like, I have a bone to pick with you concerning this case. And then it's, you know, everybody in that boardroom full. You know, there's kind of a back and forth that I felt was really well played.
Yeah.
I really like as well that Skinner wants to try and prosecute. He's like, yeah, we're going to get a psych assessment and then we're going to, you know, try. And it's like, what?
And meanwhile, that thing is like,
that was
like,
the one.
Tell me about your childhood, humanoid thing. Like,
you hear voices in your head.
This was my one bone to pick with the episode. I thought that was just the most ridiculous thing in the world. They could have come up with a million other ways of getting him out of that hospital and into a vehicle. And instead, they're like, we're going to prosecute him. Well, they don't even know if he's human or not. And it's like, what are you talking about? I hated that. I hated that. So
Imagine the fluke man in a court of law. How do you plead?
In a
I would
suit.
love that.
I think my perspective is completely different from everyone else's so far that has spoken that I've heard of. Because, like, I love that scene, but the scene that I have a sticking point with is when Skinner shows Mulder into the office, and just the way that Mulder reacts. Like, I thought that was really, like, I didn't buy that. I thought that was, like, it seemed quite unrealistic of Mulder. And
what do you think he would have done, Agent Dan?
I think Mulder, being such a cool character, would have just been like, okay, hi.
No, he's so wound up though. He's so wound up, and he's so convinced that everybody's out to get him, and he's never gonna get anything good again. It was a great little comeuppance moment.
I think it was, and it was just kind of one of those things to just kind of knock him back down a little bit. And I think that reaction is, I think that, you know, had I acted that way in the previous scenes, I get his reaction
Yeah.
to that, little
Yeah.
boardroom thing.
But getting back to we're going to prosecute it. I say it. Now, come on. That didn't bother anybody else. I was like, there were a million other things they could have come up with.
We all Annie brought it up. I mean, Agent Bennett. We all said that we have a problem with it.
I love how
but I want to
heated
hear more
everybody
about
is.
the problem.
Prosecuting a fluke worm.
I don't have a problem with it
Okay,
I mean, it
Dan
looks.
doesn't have a problem.
because I don't see
I would
why
like
they
to see
couldn't.
Dan
Why they
lead that
couldn't.
discussion
I don't see why. Surely they could have asked the fluke worm like several questions, yes, no questions, okay, and taken a polygraph of the fluke man.
Did you know it's a
See how it
fair
reacts.
point? And I didn't think I'd agree with you on this, but I might do because it's just non-verbal, right? Because they keep saying it's human, it's human, it's human.
And
God.
some people are non-verbal as well.
This is getting
Oh my
bad.
Are you
God,
saying
you kids now?
worm is autistic and
there it is.
disrespecting that it's
We're
on the
off the
spectrum?
rails. Just stop.
I think like if they are non-verbal, then it's like if they can communicate in another way, like bite the person to your left if you agree with this point,
or sign language, like apes know sign language.
They didn't even know what it was at that
Holy
moment,
shit!
though.
I'm sorry, Deb. The look on your face right now. Holy Jesus.
I mean, I'm like, maybe they could have prosecuted it, like if they can actually figure out how to communicate, right? Because it looks
Yeah.
human. It is
Exactly.
human. It has
Prosecute
human
it.
DNA.
It's humanoid.
What?
But
I mean, you can still like talk or like blink for yes and
They
blink
didn't know
double
what
blink
it
for
was,
no.
though. At that
I
point, they
mean,
didn't know even what it was.
Yeah.
We
They
are
didn't even know
assuming
what
that it
was.
speaks English.
But see, to
They
me,
didn't even know it was
I don't think
human
it speaks
at that
English.
point. though.
but to me, they could have done something worse, which is, oh, great, we're going to put it into a lab and dissect it. So
That would have been a better thing story-wise. I would have bought that.
Luke has rights.
dramatically.
yeah, they
This
decided.
is America.
Luke.
But don't worry, because the fluke's still out there anyway. Because
Fluke
when
that's
it
true.
goes up in the shower.
That's true.
So the little
But I
baby fluke escaped. So we're going to be okay because we'll get to interview it in the future.
That's
When it's
You
learned
also-
English.
You've watched like an entire season of the X-Files, so this is not going to end in a court of law. Something. So at the end, I'm like, okay, whatever they wanted to do with it, you knew the next scene would be that it escaped somehow.
Yes, and actually, I had a little bit of a problem with that part too. It's like there's nobody else in the ambulance. There's just the driver.
How convenient.
I know.
Maybe
I love
that's
that
their
little
fluke
sequence.
man protocol. Maybe that's in the manual. Like if you have
Exactly.
a fluke man, then you only need the driver, and
They
then
didn't have any guys. Nobody
See,
wants to work
little
anymore.
stuff like that. I hate. As a writer, I'm like, that is lazy. Lazy. I hate that.
Are you going to write a strongly worded letter to Chris Carter?
Although I will say this is best written episode so far that I've seen.
I think the writing's really tight.
Unfortunately, typically, his are not my favorite episodes usually.
Agreed. This doesn't feel
And
like
I
a
would
Chris
say that
Carter
this is
episode.
one of his stronger written episodes. Just
Agent
to
Bennett.
backtrack a little bit.
Just for me, I absolutely love the writing in this, and it doesn't feel like a classic Chris Carter. He doesn't normally do monsters. He doesn't normally write in this kind of very sharp, witty style. This is funny. I've genuinely laughed like throughout it. And it's everything from all your alien references to the sign of the lake where it's like live bait and nature's playground. He had a great time, didn't he? It's joyous. And then the mirroring of Mully and Scolder. Huh? That was good.
How many times have we all done that?
I know it.
So the mirroring of them at the beginning and the end, where she's like, "Can I sit down?" And he does that great line about, "Oh, I might be experiencing violent outbursts," and at the end, he's like, "I might be reeking a bit of the sewer." It's funny.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really tight.
Yeah,
and I
it's one of his better. Definitely.
I thought it was really, really good. Considering it's the second episode of the second season as well, it's like, yeah, that's going to hook into people properly. So
it did
regarding
with me,
a
it really
different
connected.
regarding a different episode, a different line of dialogue. What do you think the significance of the line "We all take our orders from someone" was? Because I thought
create the mystery.
it actually like occurred to me that while you guys have been speaking, basically like while we've been speaking, I should say, that it could potentially be seen as sort of tying back also to the one of the points that the episode is trying to make, I guess, when it could tie back to the ship scene where it's just like one of the minor crew or whatever.
Oh well, yeah. You got to take your orders from somebody, so get in there and clean out the obstruction. Yeah.
Or the case, as it may be.
The obstruction has rights.
And talking about Scully and or what was it? Sculder
and Mully.
Sculder and Mully, yeah.
Scully seems to advise and support Mulder in his struggles. What do we make of the changes in their relationship?
I think she misses the X-Files. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, she just misses the mystery, and I think she kind of enjoys refuting Mulder all the time. Like, I think she got used to not having somebody who agrees with her, and now she's working in a place where people agree with her, and she's teaching, which by definition they agree with her too. And so I think she misses that.
Yeah. It really brought her to life in a way that she probably didn't even realize she hadn't been alive until she got involved with the X-Files and Mulder. And so, yeah, I think there's a huge feeling of loss there, not only personally, but professionally. And so, yeah, she's going to jump at the chance to, hey, I'll autopsy that. Give me something interesting to do again. Not the stuff
I think that when
doing.
he's struggling, she's trying to support him. But when he's high and mighty and not listening to anybody, she tries to bring him down to earth. And so in this episode, she sees that he's still struggling. I mean, he's acting like a grumpy teenager. And so she's trying to be supportive. But as soon as he starts, getting like this and arrogant again, then she'll be there. Like Scully will return.
She's the great leveler in that way. And
yeah,
he needs,
I think so. He balances things out. Yeah.
He absolutely needs that in his life.
And do you think like she has enough to do in this episode?
No, not really. But I recognize that she was extremely pregnant when she was filming it, and I know that had a lot to do with obviously the camera angles. You only see her once full frame, and she looks like she's gonna pop. She looks huge, I understand that, and I know that physically it was really difficult for her, so she kind of had to work around that in a lot of ways. But I miss them having more interaction than they did, but they did have good moments.
Yeah,
I miss her getting down in the muck with him, but that'll come back, and I understand why. I do recognize why. It was, purely because physically she couldn't do those things at that point in her pregnancy. So.
Speaking about one of the moments between them, we hear like her say, "Mulder, it's me," for the first time. A line that was later to become arguably iconic. Why do you think this line became so significant during the run of the show?
I mean, there's so many layers to that question, right? Like, but if you just take it as sort of a straightforward thing, it's that idea of like, look to your moral compass, look to the scientific and the rational, as well as the ambition within you. Look to the past and figure out who you are and center yourself again. And it's just her grounding him, saying, look, it's me, it's okay, I'm here, and that whether she's there or not there physically, he has to hold that kind of with him. And if he can't, he starts to lose it, and we see that. So that'd be one layer.
It's intimate and formal at the same time. So like on the one hand, she's saying Mulder instead of Fox. On the other hand, she's saying it's me, which is a very intimate kind of, so she assumes that he knows the sound of her voice. And so it's like, and that kind of represents, I think, their relationship, where it is formal and respectful, but also very connected and intimate.
Well, this is what you say to people on the phone that you're very, very comfortable with, that you have a deep relationship with. I don't, in those days, because you didn't necessarily know who was on the phone, but you didn't have to announce who you were. It's me, because it is the one person. I am the one. There is that connotation to it as well, I think.
Then
Agent Deb, you look like you're about to say something.
I was gonna say, I was thinking about like now how I answer the phone versus how I used to answer the phone. That's basically like what it brought to me, and I was like, that's very true. Like I don't introduce myself anymore on the phone because everybody has caller ID, and so you know who it is before you pick up. But in the 90s, it's true that you wouldn't know necessarily who is calling. So having "it's me" just implying that he can recognize just by the voice is intimacy more than anything else.
I think it's charming that you still answer your phone, because I'm calling and I say no thank you, and I don't pick up. And then I wait for the text message or email or Facebook message later, and I'm cool with that, because nothing good happens. Nobody calls anymore unless it's it's air duct cleaning services for the 5th time that day in Canada, or someone telling me that unless I give them my credit card, I will be arrested. Or it's my parents, which is way worse than any of that. So yeah, it's all very nice.
So my boss is old-fashioned enough that yes, we have to actually communicate by phone. Sometimes she doesn't want to use Zoom because she feels like she would rather use the phone than Zoom, and I'm like, okay, at least with the phone I can walk around, which is better. So I think this is actually the only person I talk to on the phone, to be honest with you, which is why I was like, it took me a while to be like, yeah, actually, let me think about how I answer the phone now. This is how I answered the phone way back when.
But so regarding a mysterious caller on the phone, who do you think like the friend that at the FBI is that calls Mulder? Do you think they'll be friendlier than Deep Throat, or do we assume that he has hidden motives?
I think it's too early to say. For me, obviously, I haven't seen the rest of the series, so I can say from my perspective, it's way too early to say. It's just an unknown quantity out there right now. Is it a friend? Possibly. I think it puts me in kind of Mulder's shoes, where I would be like, kind of cautiously optimistic that there might be somebody there, but I'm not going to pursue it unless I get more information.
I would be suspicious based on how friendly Deep Throat was. I would assume that this is a similarly friendly guy who has his own, motivations for being helpful sometimes and harmful other times. And he certainly doesn't sound friendly. Like I've never heard someone say the word friend in such an unfriendly way. He's very stern and very unfriendly. It's like, you can keep that friendship, like that's cool. We can just be passing acquaintances, dude. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the style or lack of in this episode.
Well, I think we all know Gillian Anderson was heavily pregnant during the filming of this. And I think it was season 4 or season 5 before somebody in wardrobe finally said, like, is this what you actually want to look like? When you're pregnant and that's not written in for the character yet, I think they did what they could. I kind of feel like her wardrobe from the get-go was kind of frumpy.
I kind of thought it was supposed to be, though, because she was kind of very straight-laced and all.
Yeah, but you can be like straight-laced and look decent in clothes. Like some of her clothes were just not like.
Or remember, this is the 90s.
It is. You are right.
That flappy white overcoat that
she looked like she weighed 400 pounds with that thing on. Oh, that was awful.
But I remember buying clothes in the 90s and ripping the shoulder pads out. Like I remember doing that, and that was what I had to do unless I wanted this.
Yeah.
You know,
You can blame Dynasty for
everybody
all
had
that.
to look like a giant box.
That's where all
like
that started.
David Byrne in that music video with the giant suit. You guys remember the Talking Heads?
Yeah.
This is not my beautiful wife. This
Yeah.
is not my beautiful house. And he's wearing a gigantic suit. That's what Scully looked like. And I thought, like, were there any other options in the 90s? Because I don't remember any other options because everybody looked like that.
No,
But there
everybody.
must have been
It was
something.
actually more the 80s, but it did carry over into the early 90s. Yes. Yeah. No, that was the style. That was that. I mean, that the Golden Girls look was, right on, baby. I mean, B. Arthur. You couldn't get bigger shoulder pads.
I think you also have to consider that even like you're trying to physically hide pregnancy, it's
Right.
natural for features to change when you're pregnant. Like your nose will actually get larger, and
And you
your
can see
face
a
is
lot of
puffy.
difference in her face.
Yes, absolutely, and that's
Her face looks
nothing against her.
completely different.
It's not body shaming her or anything like that.
No,
you
just
could
the
tell
way it
just by
is.
looking at her face that like, hey, there's something going on here, and clothing and makeup.
Yeah.
It's not going to hide it.
In the review we did of Little Green Man, I said I thought she looked like she was glowing. So I guess that's a positive remark.
That's true.
Or it's at least intended as such. But Agent Deb, was there something you'd like to say?
Well, I was going to say they probably have like clothes that are 3 times bigger to try to keep the proportions too. So they were
That's
making
exactly
yeah. They were just making her 3 times bigger and changing the camera angle to then make her look smaller. So it just wasn't working very well.
Yeah.
Like,
So Mulder was not pregnant. What was his excuse for having terrible
but
hair
that's the thing.
and a big
They
suit
were-
that didn't fit?
What was wrong with his hair in this episode? I noticed that too.
I mean, he's in a teenage regression phase, right? So
Yeah.
he's going through it. He's
should have
not
had a bowl
the
cut.
only
Yes,
woman
the
that was
whole,
keeping him sane.
it's like-
Going through it.
on. He's eating way too many of those little shell things, whatever he's eating at the beginning.
Oh, the puka bead things?
Yeah, I was concerned at that point.
Yeah, the hair
And the
was
fact
like,
that he didn't really want to leave his wiretap. He's like, no, I'm in my pit now. I'm fine. I'm sulking, but I'm fine. I'm just going to look like this because nobody cares.
Yeah,
It's like,
in fact, I thought it was a flashback at first because they did the same thing with his hair when they did the flashback episode.
Yeah.
So I thought, is this a flash?
Young
For a moment,
retard.
I did think it was a flashback, but I think that's a good point that he's going through that period, where he's the petulant teenager. I guess, I don't know, bad hair all around.
But maybe that's the only way to make David Duchovny look bad. Is to give him bad hair.
It works to make him look
I
bad.
like it. I like
I
that
liked it
comment.
too.
Of course you
I'm with
did.
you. Hands off, Agent Deb. I've got dibs.
So Adam, how many?
Dan doesn't know what to say at that.
No. I
It's no appropriate
I
way to
do.
segue from this.
Yeah. How many X's out of 10 would you give this episode?
Out of 5?
Oh, we've got someone joining us. Welcome.
Oh.
Asked, is Agent John watching for the first time? Yes, he is, and no one else is watching for the first time because everybody else has watched X-Files. But Agent John is the first time.
Yes, it is the first time I've seen it. And I've been sworn to, I can't watch ahead. So I haven't watched ahead. And so it's very different for me, especially like when we were talking about this new friend at the FBI, it's like, I really don't know. I really don't know anything.
Mhm.
I barely know what's happening so far anyway. But no, so yeah, first time for me.
So, X's out of 10.
I give it an 8. I really like this episode.
Yeah, also, why?
Except for the
and,
few things that I didn't.
Any final comments before we wrap up?
I'm going to go with an 8 as well. It wasn't a perfect episode, but I feel like it was a pretty interesting story. I felt like the episode went really fast. And as somebody who is very easily distracted, if it went quick for me, it was a good story. And I liked it. So 8.
I think I'd give it a 7. To me, it's a classic X-Files episode. I was thinking while watching it, it's probably the one episode of the X-Files that I've watched more than any other episode in the entire show. So for me, like, it is a little bit boring nowadays to watch it because I've just watched it so many times. But at the same time, I do regard it as a classic X-Files episode.
And after this discussion, I'm sure you appreciate it even more.
I think I'd give it a 9. I think I love the writing. I know.
No, wait.
I love I love the writing in this.
That's why it's not a 10.
I love the way that it just unfolds, and all the relationships are sort of beginning to do very, very different things, which I find really interesting. And like, the bit where the creature is hiding down in the portaloo, and like the vomiting up of the fluke worm in the shower, like those are memorable, those are iconic moments. And then I like the way that it ends the episode with obviously Mulder and Scully sat on the bench having their chat, but it doesn't end there. It goes back to the creature. It leaves you with the creature. And that doesn't happen very often. Normally it's, let's have our little wrap up on the bench or whatever, and then we're done, file closed or not, or there's kind of shady character in the background. But it's not. It takes you away from that. And it says, okay, they're there doing what they're doing, but come back to what the story is trying to tell you here. Look that creature in the face, deal with the consequences of your actions, and take some responsibility. So I really like it from a sort of eco-critical kind of view as well. So
I want to give it between an 8 and a 9. Most of it is nostalgia. That was one of my favorite episodes when it actually came out. I can't believe my parents let me watch this when I was like 10 years old, but and so really, really enjoyed it. So like when I rewatch it today, I was like, oh, I know how it ends and so on and so forth. And it's more like, 20 years later or 30 years later, watching it with what we know now, it's like a few things that didn't age well, but otherwise it's a really good episode.
I didn't realize I could do what Agent Deb did, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing and copy you. I gave between an 8 and a 9. I'm not going to say 8.5. I'm going to say somewhere in between. None of you will know what I'm thinking. Because on the one hand, the practical effects were really good. The writing, I feel, mostly was excellent and very witty. Also, there's a lot going on. Oh my God, there's a new friend from the FBI and the Chernobyl stuff. And who are these Russian guys? And like Mulder and Scully and their relationship, and then Skinner and his situation. And then on top of that, like this flirting with the idea that while the X-Files is closed, maybe some people are thinking about reopening it in some capacity. Like there's just so much going on. So it's not boring. But there were some really cheesy elements. Like we always knew when someone was going to die. There was like an hour and a half long lead up to it with the music. And I love the music. I love Mark Snow. But like the music was like, bah, 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 bah. And then you see this long shot and it's like, oh, that guy, we haven't seen much of him and we're not going to see much more of him, are we? Like, so, I mean, there are things like that that bring it down. So I keep sliding between the 8 and 9. So thank you, Agent Deb, for giving me that possible option.
Can I have you do a little more of the music again? That was good.
It was like ding ding ding, boom 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 boom.
Well, I thought some of the music.
Am I wrong? Does that know what it sounded like?
No, it was good.
I thought some of the music on the Russian ship was really good.
Yeah, very mysterious and melancholy and scary.
I think it's like I quite like when Mark Snow uses like the choral, like voice, like imitating human voices, but with the synthesizers, like he did. It was reminding me of Genderbender when he did that as well, like in the caves and stuff.
I missed you guys for the previous podcast, and one of the things that I had kind of written as a comment, like an aside, was that I felt like the music starting in this season was markedly better.
I do agree with that.
I'm not sure what it is specifically, but it's richer.
It is better than last season.
Yeah, it's I don't know.
Yeah,
I like it better.
I also it occurred to me just now that it seems like using like the Russian ship and stuff like that. like follows on from the stuff that we had in Little Green Man that was like in Puerto Rico and stuff like that. So maybe like they were intentionally like trying to develop more of an international feel to the show at the start of the second season.
Widening the scope of the show. Yeah.
That's interesting. I think Ellie, she voted the show 9 out of 10 as well.
Oh, she said, "Oh, it's 9 for me too."
Yeah.
I agree, Al. Good choice.
I think she's
No waffling. It was a 9. It's not an 8. It's not an 8.5.
She's definitive, yes.
I think she's a first-time viewer as well because she asked us to like stay away from spoilers. But also,
that's cool.
Also thanked us for this discussion. So yeah, I'd like to thank like all the panelists for joining this discussion, and we hope that you, our viewers, have enjoyed it too. Let us know what you're thinking in the comment section, like whether you enjoyed this episode or what you thought about the host this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date and catch us each time that we're on. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth is still out there.